In this unforgiving realm, survival isn't just a skill, it's a constant battle. And the most crucial fortress in that battle isn't a rifle or a knife, it's shelter. Not just any shelter, but a permanent haven against the killing cold, the driving rain, the scorching sun, and the things that stalk the night. A log cabin. Building one was a monumental task of sweat, skill, and sheer determination. But before the first axe blow fell, before the first log was notched, came a decision far more critical, one that could spell the difference between a secure winter refuge and a frozen tomb: choosing the perfect site. Where did a mountain man sink his roots in this vast, dangerous land? How did he read the subtle language of the terrain to find that one spot, that needle in a haystack, that offered the delicate balance of resources, defense, and sanctuary? It wasn't luck. It was a calculated science born of hard-won experience where a single misjudgment could be fatal. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Today, we delve into the lost art of choosing a cabin site like a mountain man. We'll uncover the critical factors they weighed, the dangers they avoided, and the instincts they honed to master the wilderness and carve out a life where few dared to tread. Part 1. The weight of decision. More than just logs. Imagine standing alone, hundreds, maybe thousands of miles from the nearest town. Your life depends entirely on your own wits, your rifle, your knife, and the meager supplies in your possibles bag. The vast, silent wilderness stretches to every horizon. Beautiful, yes, but utterly indifferent to your survival. In this world, the decision of where to build your cabin wasn't just about convenience. It was the cornerstone upon which your entire existence in that region would rest. A cabin was more than just four walls and a roof. It was a base camp for trapping expeditions that could last weeks or months. It was a workshop for repairing gear, tanning hides, and casting bullets. It was a fortress against blizzards that could rage for days on end. It was a larder for storing precious dried meat and supplies. And perhaps most importantly, it was a sanctuary, the one place in a hostile world where a man could let down his guard, if only for a moment, find warmth, and rest his weary body. Many greenhorns, fresh from the east and filled with romantic notions of frontier life, made fatal errors right here at the very beginning. They'd choose a spot based on a pretty view, or the first flat piece of ground they found near a stream, without considering the hidden dangers or the long-term necessities. They might build in a picturesque meadow, only to find it became a windswept freezer in winter or a mosquito-infested swamp in spring. They might build too close to a river that seemed gentle in August, only to have their home swept away by ferocious spring floods. Or they'd build in a dense forest, easy for timber, but find themselves blind to approaching danger, whether it be a grizzly bear or a less than friendly war party. The experienced mountain man knew better. He understood that the land itself held clues, warnings, and promises. He approached the selection of a cabin site with the same meticulous care he used when setting a beaver trap or stalking an elk. He wasn't just looking for a place to build, he was looking for a place to live, to thrive, to survive against all odds. He evaluated the landscape through a lens sharpened by countless near misses and the harsh lessons learned from those who didn't make it. Water, wood, game, security, shelter from the elements. These weren't items on a checklist, they were the interwoven threads of life itself. Let's break down how they weighed these critical factors. Part 2. Water is life. The first consideration. Above all else, a man needs water. It's the most fundamental requirement for life, and the mountain man was no exception. Finding a reliable, year-round source of clean water was almost always the first and most critical factor in selecting a cabin site. He wasn't just looking for any water. He needed a source he could depend on through scorching summers and frozen winters. A rushing river might seem ideal, but was it prone to violent floods in the spring thaw? That picturesque creek? Would it dwindle to a muddy trickle or freeze solid in January? A hidden spring, bubbling clear and cold from the mountainside, was often the most prized find. Springs were less likely to freeze completely, often maintained a consistent flow, and their water was typically pure. An experienced man would scout the area thoroughly. He'd look for signs of high water marks on trees and rocks near rivers and streams, nature's own warnings of flood potential. He'd examine creek beds, noting the size of the rocks and debris, which indicated the force of the water during peak flow. He'd observe the vegetation. Certain plants thrive in consistently damp soil, signaling a reliable water source nearby. He might even dig a test hole near a promising spot to see how quickly groundwater seeped in. Jim Bridger, a man whose name is synonymous with the Rocky Mountain fur trade, was known to favor locations near the headwaters of streams or close to reliable springs. He understood that higher elevations often meant purer water and less risk of the devastating floods that could plague lower valleys. The water source wasn't just for drinking, it was essential for cooking, for cleaning hides, and crucially, for trapping. Many of the most valuable fur-bearing animals, especially the beaver, the cornerstone of the fur trade economy, were aquatic. A cabin situated near good beaver habitat meant shorter, more efficient trapping lines. The presence of beaver dams themselves could be a good indicator of a stable water system. But proximity had its dangers too. Building too close could invite flooding or unwanted attention from animals drawn to the water. The ideal spot was often slightly elevated, within easy carrying distance, perhaps a few hundred yards, of the water source, balancing access with safety. Without a reliable source of water, easily accessible year-round, no site, no matter how advantageous otherwise, could be considered viable. It was the non-negotiable foundation of survival. Part 3. Timber and Fuel. Resources within reach. Once a reliable water source was identified, the next critical resource was wood. Lots of it? A log cabin, by its very nature, required a substantial supply of straight, sound timber, preferably within a reasonable distance, to minimize the back-breaking labor of felling, limbing, and hauling logs. The ideal trees were typically conifers like pine, spruce, or fir. These grew relatively straight, were easier to work with hand tools like the axe and adze, and offered decent insulation. Hardwoods were generally avoided for the main structure, as they were much heavier and harder to cut and shape, though they might be used for flooring, pegs, or furniture if available. The mountain man would carefully survey the surrounding forest. He wasn't just looking for any trees, he was assessing the quality and quantity. Were there enough mature, straight trees of the right diameter to build the cabin walls? Was the timber sound, free from rot or excessive knots? He'd look at the density of the forest. A sparse stand meant long hauls, while an overly dense, dark forest could be gloomy, damp, and hinder visibility for defense. Transporting logs, even short distances, was arduous work, often done with sheer muscle power, perhaps aided by a horse or mule if the trapper was fortunate enough to own one. Therefore, finding a site with good timber nearby was paramount. Ideally, the trees could be felled and skidded downhill towards the building site. But the need for wood didn't end with the cabin walls. An equally vital consideration was a long-term supply of firewood. A cabin in the high country could require a fire burning almost constantly for months during the winter, consuming a staggering amount of fuel. The mountain man needed access to not only green wood for construction, but also standing dead timber or fallen logs that could be easily cut and split for burning. Hauling firewood daily from miles away was simply not sustainable. He'd look for areas with a mix of mature trees for building and dead or downed wood for fuel. He'd also consider the type of wood available for burning. Hardwoods burn longer and hotter, while softwoods like pine burn quickly and produce more creosote, requiring more frequent chimney cleaning. The perfect site offered a balance, close enough to abundant timber and fuel resources to make construction and daily life feasible, but perhaps situated in a natural clearing or on the edge of the forest, rather than deep within it. This provided easier access, better sunlight, improved visibility, and reduced the immediate risk of fire spreading to the cabin from the surrounding woods. Having water and wood within easy reach formed the essential resource triangle for any prospective cabin site. Part 4. The larder nearby, hunting and trapping grounds. A cabin wasn't just a place to sleep, it was the center of the mountain man's operations. Its location needed to support his primary purpose, acquiring furs and sustaining himself. This meant evaluating the site's proximity to productive hunting and trapping grounds. Before settling on a spot, the mountain man would spend considerable time scouting the surrounding territory, reading the signs to gauge its potential. Was there evidence of deer, elk, or even bison herds frequenting the area? These large animals provided not only meat, but also hides for clothing, sinew for sewing, and bones for tools. He'd look for game trails, droppings, browse lines on shrubs, and natural salt licks that attracted animals. For the fur trapper, proximity to waterways teeming with beaver, otter, and mink was crucial. He'd examine streams and ponds for dams, lodges, slides, and tracks. A site that served as a central point for multiple trapping lines radiating outwards was highly desirable, minimizing travel time and maximizing efficiency during the trapping season. He also needed to consider the seasonal movements of game. An area abundant with elk in the summer might be completely empty once the heavy snows arrived, forcing the animals to migrate to lower elevations. The ideal location offered reasonably consistent access to game throughout the year, or was situated strategically along migration routes. However, there was a delicate balance to strike. Building too close to major game trails or prime hunting grounds could be counterproductive. Constant human presence might drive the animals away. More dangerously, it could attract large predators like grizzly bears and wolves, drawn by the scent of cooking fires, stored meat, or discarded carcasses. A cabin needed to be close enough for efficient hunting and trapping, but far enough away to maintain a degree of separation and avoid becoming a nuisance or a target. Fishing opportunities were also a factor. Rivers and lakes could provide a valuable supplementary food source, especially during leaner times. The presence of fish indicated a healthy ecosystem, which often correlated with good hunting and trapping as well. The mountain man wasn't just looking for a place with animals. He was looking for a strategic location within a larger ecosystem that he could sustainably harvest. He needed a larder nearby, but one that wouldn't attract unwanted dinner guests. Part 5. Defending the cabin. Weather, predators, and hostilize. Survival in the mountains wasn't just about finding resources. It was about enduring the elements and staying safe from threats, both natural and human. The location of a cabin played a critical role in defense and security. Protection from the brutal weather was paramount. An experienced man would never build on an exposed ridgeline where the full force of winter winds could tear at the structure and suck the warmth from within. He'd avoid the very bottom of narrow valleys or hollows, which could become frost pockets, areas where cold air settled, making them significantly colder than the surrounding terrain and potentially prone to flash floods. Ideally, he sought a location with some natural shelter. The lee side of a hill, a spot nestled in a stand of timber, or a location shielded by rock outcroppings could offer significant protection from prevailing winds and drifting snow. He'd pay attention to the sun's path. A south-facing slope received more sunlight in winter, helping to melt snow and passively warm the cabin while offering some shade in the summer. Building on a slight elevation often provided better drainage, preventing the cabin floor from becoming a damp, muddy mess. Visibility was a double-edged sword. While seclusion could offer protection, being completely blind to the surroundings was dangerous. The mountain man needed to be able to spot approaching danger, whether it was a grizzly bear lumbering towards his meat cache or the glint of sunlight off a rifle barrel miles away. Many cabins were situated to offer a commanding view of the immediate approaches, perhaps overlooking a valley or clearing, while still being somewhat concealed from distant observation. Natural terrain features were often incorporated into the defensive strategy. Building with a steep hillside or cliff face to the rear limited the directions from which an attack could come. A river or dense thicket could serve as a natural barrier on one or more sides. Easy escape routes were also considered. Was there a hidden draw or patch of thick timber nearby where a man could slip away if overwhelmed? Defense wasn't just against the elements and animals. The frontier could be a lawless place. Encounters with hostile Native American groups, or even desperate and unscrupulous white men, were a constant possibility. A well-chosen site was often inconspicuous, located off main trails, difficult to spot from a distance. Some mountain men went to great lengths to conceal their cabins, choosing hidden valleys or dense groves. Choosing a site was a complex calculation of risk and benefit, balancing the need for resources with the need for shelter and security. It required an intimate understanding of microclimates, terrain, and potential threats. Part 6. The Hidden Haven: Accessibility versus Seclusion. Beyond the immediate needs of water, wood, game, and defense, the mountain man had to consider the cabin's place within the larger landscape. How accessible did it need to be? Or how secluded? This often depended on the individual and his role in the fur trade. Was he a company man, an engagé, needing to stay within reasonable distance of established forts or rendezvous points to deliver his furs and receive supplies? Or was he a free trapper, valuing independence and seclusion above all else, perhaps venturing into territories untouched by competitors? A site deep in the wilderness offered prime trapping and security through isolation, but it meant long, arduous journeys to trade furs and restock essentials like gunpowder, lead, traps, coffee, and tobacco. Pack animals, horses or mules, were essential for these long hauls, and the chosen cabin site needed to have adequate grazing nearby to sustain them, at least seasonally. The terrain surrounding the cabin also mattered. Could pack animals navigate the trails leading to and from it, especially when laden with heavy packs of furs? Conversely, a site closer to established routes or rendezvous locations offered easier logistics, but potentially faced more competition for resources and increased risk of unwanted encounters. Some mountain men established multiple cabins, a main base in a more secluded, resource-rich area, and smaller temporary line cabins along their trapping routes for overnight stays. The choice often reflected a personal philosophy. Men like Jedediah Smith, constantly pushing into new territories, might prioritize locations that served as strategic launching points for further exploration. Others, perhaps older or seeking a more settled existence, might prioritize long-term security and resource stability over ease of access to the outside world. Ultimately, the balance between accessibility and seclusion was another layer in the complex calculation of choosing a home. It required foresight, an understanding of the vast distances involved, and a clear assessment of one's own goals and tolerance for isolation. Part 7. Reading the Land: Instinct and Experience. Beyond the tangible factors of water, wood, game, and defense, there was an intangible element that separated the master woodsman from the novice: instinct. It was an almost sixth sense, honed by years spent living and breathing the wilderness, learning its rhythms, its dangers, and its subtle language. Choosing the perfect cabin site wasn't just about ticking boxes. It was about feeling the land. An experienced mountain man could walk into a valley and sense things that a newcomer would completely miss. He could read the story told by the direction of the prevailing winds in the twist of the trees, gauge the severity of winters by the scars on the landscape, and predict the behavior of local wildlife by signs invisible to the untrained eye. He learned to trust his gut. Sometimes a site might look perfect on paper: good water, plenty of timber, abundant game signs. But something just felt wrong. Maybe it was an unusual silence in the woods, a lack of birdsong, or a subtle feeling of being watched. The veteran mountain man learned to heed these warnings, even if he couldn't articulate the exact reason. This intuition wasn't mystical. It was the subconscious processing of thousands of tiny environmental cues, filtered through years of experience. He would spend time in a potential area, observing it through different times of day and varying weather conditions. How did the sun track across the sky? Where did the shadows fall? How did the wind funnel through the terrain? Where did the snow accumulate most deeply? He'd watch the animals, their trails, their bedding areas, their reactions to his presence. They were the true natives, and their behavior offered invaluable insights into the area's character. Consider the legendary John Coulter, who survived his incredible naked run from the Blackfeet. His later choices of campsites and routes were undoubtedly informed by that brutal experience, prioritizing defensibility and escape routes perhaps more than others. Or think of Osborne Russell, whose journals provide such a rich account of mountain life. His detailed observations of flora, fauna, and weather patterns demonstrate the deep level of environmental literacy these men possessed. They didn't just live on the land, they lived with it in constant dialogue. The incredible stories of men like Coulter and Russell truly capture the spirit of the mountain man era. If you want to dive deeper into their harrowing experiences and valuable insights, be sure to check out our episodes detailing John Coulter's legendary escape and the fascinating life documented in Osborne Russell's journal. You'll find the links in the description. This deep connection, this ability to read the landscape and trust hard-earned instincts, was the final crucial element. It allowed the mountain man to synthesize all the logical factors: water, wood, game, defense, access, and overlay them with an intuitive understanding of place, ultimately leading him to that one spot where he could build his haven and make his stand against the wilderness. Choosing where to build a cabin was arguably one of the most important decisions a mountain man ever made. It was far more than selecting a plot of land. It was an act of profound engagement with the environment, a strategic calculation for survival, and a statement of intent to endure in a world that constantly tested the limits of human resilience. The perfect site offered a delicate equilibrium: abundant resources balanced with security, shelter balanced with awareness, accessibility balanced with seclusion. Finding that balance required keen observation, practical knowledge, physical endurance, and that intangible, hard-won instinct for reading the land. These hidden cabins, scattered across the vastness of the American West, were the anchors of the fur trade era. They were the lonely outpost from which trails were blazed, fortunes in fur were sought, and the map of a continent was slowly, painstakingly filled in. The wisdom employed in choosing their locations speaks volumes about the skills and mindset of the men who built them, a testament to their ability to not just survive, but to truly master the wilderness. Understanding how they made these critical decisions gives us a deeper appreciation for their resourcefulness and their intimate connection to the natural world. It's a connection that, in many ways, we strive to rediscover today. If you found this look into cabin site selection fascinating, you might also want to check out our previous video, Mastering the Wilderness: How Mountain Men Built Their Cabins, where we dive into the actual construction process. And for more on the tools that made it all possible, don't miss 7 essential survival tools that kept frontiersmen alive. What do you think was the most critical factor in choosing a cabin site? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Wild America, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration of frontier life. Thanks for watching.